As NOAA's acting administrator. Thank you for coming back for your second time. As acting administrator, Dr. Jacobs oversees the agency's $5.4 billion budget, which includes NOAA's sea, air, land, and space observing platforms and the critical environmental data they provide. He also covers the wet side of NOAA and all of its work in fisheries and coastal management. Now the administration has requested $4.46 billion for NOAA for fiscal year 2020. The agency's top three priorities include improving extreme weather prediction through the implementation of the Weather Act, expanding the blue economy, and further investments in space innovation. These are good steps, but remain vastly overshadowed by the devastating cuts President Trump has in store for NOAA. The request represents an 18% decrease, or nearly a $1 billion cut from the 2019 enacted level. In terms of job cuts, this amounts to a reduction of 547 civilian positions within the agency, which is quite devastating. The massive cuts or outright elimination of vital environmental research remains wildly unrealistic and unworkable, just as they have for the past 2 fiscal years. This proposal severely cuts funding for ocean exploration and observations, species recovery programs, the tsunami warning program, fisheries management programs, grants to our academic and nonprofit research institutions that conduct research to further NOAA's goals and mission, just to name a few. It once again proposes a complete elimination of funding for NOAA grant and education program it deems as lower priority, including Sea Grant, Coastal Zone Management Grants, Pacific Coastal Climate Research, the Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund. These remain non-starters with the subcommittee, we must tell you now. I would like to remind the administration that investment in critical research at our universities protecting coastal habitats, where 1/2 of the U.S. population resides, and the livelihoods of fishermen are not low priority, not to this subcommittee. These grant programs employ thousands of scientists across the country and territories, protect local economies, and give us the tools to safeguard our communities against sea level rise and climate change. The investments we make today will prepare us for the challenges we face tomorrow. As our February hearing on NOAA climate research made very clear, we are starting to experience those challenges now. Therefore, I do not believe this budget, as presented to us today, allows NOAA to live up to its core mission as the administration would have us believe. Dr. Jacobs, it is good to see you. Thank you for joining us to discuss NOAA's priorities and outlook for fiscal year 2020. Thank you for your testimony, sir. Dr. Jacobs, and I say this with all due respect, I'm having a hard time taking this budget proposal seriously. It includes an 18% top-line cut along with wholesale elimination of nearly all of the grant programs. It proposes terminating 547 NOAA employees and upending the lives of so many students and postdocs whose funding would be pulled from Sea Grant, the cooperative institutes, and the other external research funding. Do you know how many students exactly would lose the funding they depend on to continue their studies? Is it dozens, hundreds, thousands maybe?
I don't know the exact number of students that would be impacted.
Does anybody know at NOAA that could tell us at a sooner rather than later date?
I'll look into that and see if I can find a number.
So this budget would, in my opinion, halt the early careers of possibly thousands of young scientists. Has NOAA ever discussed that ramification with the department and OMB?
We have, but in a situation where we had to make some tough choices in balancing administration priorities, we really focused on our core mission of protecting life and property.
But let me go back a second to my initial question. You say you don't know how many people it would affect. In the discussions with OMB, didn't it come up the possibility that Congress would ask you how many people it would affect? We tend to do that a lot.
Well, as far as the impact to our ability to maintain our core mission, we still have what we need to do that. As far as the outreach into the educational aspect of it, I don't have that number.
Continue with education. I'm extremely disappointed to once again see severe cuts to NOAA's Office of Education. In particular, the budget proposes to eliminate a program I helped to create over 20 years ago, the Educational Partnership Program with minority serving institutions. Do you know what some of the accomplishments of this program are? For example, that the partner institutions have produced over 2,300 degrees in the NOAA sciences since 2002.
Oh, it's a very valuable program. I would point out that we are $1 million above the previous year's president's budget in this program. As far as STEM goes, there's actually quite a few aspects of this throughout NOAA. We have K through 12 programs at the forecast offices. We have a lot of different outreach that we still do. In fact, moving the community model development program outside of NOAA and putting a lot of our data on external web portals gives the universities and students and PIs and postdocs access to a tremendous amount of information. So my hope is that a lot of this data, while we may not explicitly be funding their research, we'll be giving them access to more information and data to do research.
Well, one of the things that troubles me with this whole presentation is that NOAA doesn't seem to know just how successful they've been. I mean, that the cuts are coming in without fully understanding that these programs mean a lot to a lot of people and produce for the future of our country. Are you also aware that over 50% of our nation's black PhD graduates in the marine and atmospheric sciences benefited from these programs? You do.
Again, it's in the budget situation we're in, we had to make tough choices and focus on our core
What's the budget
mission.
situation you're in? Is it, I mean, because we've been around here long enough to also know that there's another way of presenting budgets, and that is you leave holes that are easy for anybody to see, and then Congress will take care of it. Is this what's happening here, that you're all hoping that Congress will fill in these holes with in negotiations with the Senate, the House and the Senate?
Well, we made a conscious decision to focus on our core mission of maintaining full-time employees and protecting life and property.
Let me just ask you one more question. This budget proposes to cut an additional 248 employees from the National Weather Service, despite regular reports, including one from GAO, of understaffing and subsequent negative impacts on the quality of forecast produced. How many hours have weather forecasters worked without pay, covering vacant operational shifts because they have hit the overtime premium pay cap imposed by law? What efforts, if any, has the Weather Service taken to avoid requiring its forecasters to work shifts for which they will not be paid?
As far as I know, we're doing a tremendous amount of work in actually backfilling and hiring new forecasters. It's this in FY 2018, it was the first time since 2011 that our actual hiring had outpaced attrition. And granted, we had a setback during the shutdown because of typical retirements happening at the end of the year. We're staffed at roughly 91.5% right now. And once we actually get to the point where we're fully staffed, we won't have to have people, working overtime unless they want to.
Mr. Jacobs, the administration is proposing the elimination of the National Centers for Coastal Ocean. No cost. Let's discuss this proposal. First, your budget says that you will continue some of the highest priority work, but you fail to provide any information about how you will implement this plan. Can you shed some light on it?
I believe you're talking about the end cost, the minus 23.7. So again, we are retaining 8.8 million of that to maintain our core functions and the tools that we provide to the public for not just the harmful algal bloom and hypoxia that we were just discussing, but pathogen research and prevention. But the additional research that's being done is not part of that retention of core capability.
You still didn't tell us exactly how you're going to implement the plan, though.
Well, implement the 8.8 will not be implementing anything new. It'll just be retaining the core capabilities that we already do.
You know, I having a difficulty with this hearing because a lot of these things that are coming up look like they were not thought through completely. And as my colleague, Mr. Case, said, there's got to be people at NOAA who take this seriously. I mean, and I know you do, and it's clear to me that this did not come from you folks. You might have been told, here it is, and maybe you can comment on it, but this sounds like a policy that comes from some other place. But we will have to deal with that as time goes on. The budget also cuts the program in the Arctic that models and predicts sea ice. Given that Russia is rapidly expanding its activities in the Arctic, our knowledge and understanding of sea ice is critical to our national security. How do you reconcile the elimination of NOCAS with the administration's broader national security efforts?
So a lot of the research that we do as it pertains to climate in the Arctic is being cut, but I would like to add that we are doing some enhanced work and development on forecasting and analyzing sea ice and sea ice flow as it pertains to both our dynamical weather model and our general circulation climate models. And this is something that we're working very closely with the Navy on.
You're working with the Navy, and you feel that then this will make up for any deficiency that I might have pointed out?
It's yet to be determined if it would make up for the deficiencies. I think that the scope of it is a little bit different. It's more how do we manage dealing with the sea ice and the analysis in the next couple of years versus very long range.
NOCAS has been performing the work of evaluating the impacts of rising sea levels on our coastal military installations, as Congress has repeatedly directed in the National Defense Authorization Act. Can you explain the seeming contradiction between the department's claims of prioritizing national security and the elimination of a program which is critical to it?
We actually are doing a tremendous amount of work in research and getting our data out there through various ocean data portals. Two of the things that I'd like to point out, well, one of them, the marinecadastre.gov website, this is where you can actually access a lot of the sea level rise data. This is made available to the public. We're increasing this by $4 million to try to get the data out to the public. This is something that I think would be very useful, not just for our stakeholders, but possibly any other, whether it's private sector, other government agency doing planning when it comes to future mitigation of sea level rise.
Jacobs, Puerto Rico's coral reefs provide nearly $1 billion in economic value to the island annually, supporting the tourism industry and protecting lives and infrastructure from storm surge by acting as a barrier. September 2017, Hurricanes Irma and Maria caused extensive damage to these valuable and slow-growing reefs. Fortunately, NOAA's coral restoration work can help dramatically speed up the recovery. How does the proposed 6% cut to the coral reef program reflect the need to restore Puerto Rico's damaged corals and coordinate with agencies like FEMA to conduct post-storm damage assessments?
So the coral reefs are incredibly important, and after the storm, one of the things that we did, in addition to working with the Marine Corps to install radars and get the basic observing system capabilities up there, was to go and revitalize and do a lot of the marine debris removal of the coral reefs. One of the issues, not just with the damage to the reef, but actually the reef itself was damaged just from debris, as well as enhancing the coral reef. One of the great things about the reefs around Puerto Rico is that they actually are an integral part of the dissipating the wave energy. So it's incredibly important to have them in place to essentially protect the land from not just storm surge, but waves.
So these cuts, you think will affect that work in any way?
Well, a lot of this research just on the coral side it's a reduction of 1.6 from the enacted, but it retains 26.1 million to continue on with that research. And so there is the opportunity to focus research on coral restoration as well as disease and such.
We're big fans of NOAA here, and I suspect you could do better job than private industry in putting together an app that could give us information. In fact, I'll probably get a lot of letters on this, or some, but I bet you when they were putting together their apps, they were working off a lot of information that you guys have been gathering for years and NOAA, so don't undersell yourself. Thank you for your testimony today. I'm not making excuses, but if at times the questioning was probing, it's because we are big fans of NOAA here, and we want NOAA to succeed and to continue to succeed. And when we see a budget proposal like this one, it worries us. And I think in this case, we when it comes to spending money, we always have differences on different sides of the aisle. But I can honestly speak for Ms. Adderholt to say that we are fans of NOAA. We want NOAA to do the right job and to be prepared and supported by Congress in doing the right job. So that's why we asked the questions the way we did. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and hope to see you again.
Well, thank you for your support.